It's our third time of sharing Sunday service with you. We have joined you on two occasions to hear Patrick in his presentations, and so this is our third time with you, and I'm delighted to be with a group that has learned as we have to overlook Patrick and Rose's loyalty to the New York Yankees. Well, we have a tall order today in 20 minutes to talk about developing leaders, and so I'm going to jump right in. Hope it doesn't feel too much like drinking from a fire hose, but I'd like to start by establishing a context for us today that wow, okay. As we look at how leadership theory has been developed in the United States, leadership theory has, by and large, dealt with both the role of the leader and the involvement of the situation or the group that they're leading. But up until the 1950s, it really focused on the character traits that leaders had. That they would take individuals who were identified as successful. They would compare their traits, and as a result, determine that certain personalities were ideal for leading a group. Those character trait theories identify things like superiority to followers in intellect, achievement, dependability. Oftentimes, socioeconomic status was a little higher in the group, a sense of humor, and even earlier notions like successful leaders are often taller than their followers. And so these great man theories really dominated research across America up through the 50s. And then what we find is in the 60s, two groups took off from that, especially as the leadership centers at Michigan, University of Michigan, and Ohio State were employed by the military to think even further, and Blake and Mouton determined that in their research that it wasn't just who we are that makes for a successful leader, but really more in terms of what we do. That what our behavior is as a leader, what our leadership style really determines our success as a leader, and that their managerial grid, which is classic and which you could easily Google Blake and Mouton and it'll pop up with all kinds of stuff because of their work at the University of Texas, really focused on helping leaders understand what we do and how to do that, how to employ our leadership style in a successful way. Compared or contrasted to Ohio State, which went the next step with Fiedler and all, because they really thought, well, personality theory says that basically by the age of 21, we have our personality pretty well established, that you really can't change your personality. And so they sought to research ways in which they could change the situation instead of changing the person. And by changing the situation or getting the group to adapt to the leader, then the goals would be accomplished and there would be the results that were desired by each group. So Blake and Mouton focused on the leader. Ohio State really focused on the situation. And that really takes us through the 60s and 70s to a point where Hershey and Blanchard come forth with situational leadership and really helped leaders understand how they needed to adapt. While we might have a preferred leadership style or behavior, that we really need to adapt based on the maturity of our followers. That If our followers don't know how to do a certain thing, that we maybe have a telling style of leadership. But then as our followers mature in their abilities and skills, that as a leader, you need to adapt to that maturity um, so that when your followers know how to do things, that you would allow more participation in leadership and actually get to a point where you may be delegating certain things completely. For example, um, the first time that someone leads Sunday service, you may spend more time helping them understand what they need to do and to tell them what to do. But after someone has done that a few times, you could feel really comfortable to delegate out that opportunity. And so the leader adapts, and that creates an opportunity for success and for results. Leadership theory since then has really taken off from this, and of course it's gone in so many different directions. But really, the standard is that the leader is expected to adapt to be successful. Now that's a few decades of research. I hope you don't feel like you're drinking from a fire hose, but uh, I want to use that as our context to then go on to say, okay, um, how about if we spend some time thinking about maybe one of the most successful leaders in history? Because when I think about Jesus, I think about someone who left the earth a couple thousand years ago, and still here we are today with a third of the world's population ascribing to that. And so, of course, as we look at the Bible, a book that's been printed since 1455, and it's still, even in the last 50 years, just selling significantly more than any other work. And especially uh, looking at the four Gospels, because Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John are are the record of the 3 years of Jesus' ministry, that he really takes the movement from zero to a point where it continued to grow to where we are today. And I do that using the harmony of the Gospels. This is a copy of the text I had in university, but actually the harmony started in the early 1900s and really took the four Gospels and compared them, um, put them in chronological order. So the different passages from those four books, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, are are put together in a chronological order so that we can see the pattern or the behavior of Jesus as he did that. So let me share a little bit about that. A couple things that really jumped to mind for me is that Jesus' style was very, very relational, um, and so as we look at this chronology, what we'll see is that he was very much involved, and really involved with people. And really, what we're talking about is a 3 year period. That his formal ministry was started at age 30, um, coming from the Jewish tradition and with the skills of a carpenter, and dying at age 33 in 3 or 4 months. So we're really talking about a 3 year period. And as I studied this, the one of the first things that really caught my eye was that it wasn't until he was halfway into those 3 years, 18 months into those 3 years, before he had his 12 disciples. In fact, it was a year, it was a third of the way into that before he even had his first five. And that's when you put the four together chronologically, that he only had two of his miracles in that first half of his ministry, and he spent the majority of his time in rural areas, which was again surprising to me because, if you're trying to amass a group, obviously it's easier to do in urban areas where there's more people. And when I'm looking at this in terms of behavior, the question that comes is, well, what was Jesus doing with all this first half then? If he's starting from zero, and the answer that comes is he was building relationships. Um, and then as we look at the next 6 to 9 months of this time period, this timeline, we see that Jesus spends more and more time with that small group, and that he's equipping them, he's training them, they do ministry together, they stop and reflect together, and that even before, even after 2 years, that group had grown from the 12 that we hear most often to 72, and really a significant multiplication of ministry. And again, I think quite impressive with the results that we still see in the world today. If I was to characterize his style, to me, he had an exceptional ability to accept a person, accept a very diverse group of people, to love on them, but at the same time to encourage them and challenge them to take the next step in their spiritual journey. To accept and love on them at the same time to encourage them to take the next step in their journey. To not be satisfied with the status quo, so to speak. So, if I take these two contexts that we set up in terms of theory of leadership and its evolution, and the relational style of leadership that Jesus set as an example, the question then is so what? For me, the so what then comes to the fact that I grew up in a home with two parents who were teachers, and they were very much they were very thoughtful in terms of development. That they would think of ways to challenge me as their firstborn to grow and to do so very intentionally. Now, I know Dr. Seuss has come under a bit of an attack lately, but we try to overlook that, and because his part in my life is that as a 4-year-old, I remember seeing this box of 3 books on top of the refrigerator. I can't remember what the third book was. I think it was Green Eggs and Ham, but the two I'm sure of are these 2 books. And the challenge, when I noticed that and asked my parents about it, their challenge was to I could have these books one at a time. If I could demonstrate my reading and understanding of those books, I would get one and then get the other, and given the opportunity to make a decision to either accept that challenge, and then with each step to accept each step. So of course, they're colorful. I could see the color, and as a 4-year-old, was very attracted to the idea and accepted that challenge and gained access to all 3 books over time. That challenge continued for me, and as I think about a lifetime of thinking and learning about leadership, I think of my first formal training in leadership came as a 12-year-old, going to patrol leader development in Boy Scouts for a week, and then practicing that leadership in my Boy Scout troop. Again, another activity that I've been a part of for the last 50 years, and yes, another group that's certainly taken its hits with some of the abuses there, but a part of my journey that has given me the opportunity to be part of a shared vision, to be given opportunities to make decisions, empowered to fulfill certain goals, encouraged to think about what works and doesn't work, and then to do it again. So in fact, that has become very much even today as a Scoutmaster, or as a leader in our congregation, as a member of my family, or for many in terms of their own children. The idea of developing leadership is something that I think of as being very intentional, something that I think of in terms of promoting the intentionality piece of it, that we don't just depend on someone coming to our group with natural abilities or or abilities that have been developed elsewhere, but that with each group, there's an intentionality for developing leaders and helping people increase their impact. And so there's a shared vision, whether it be developing skills and, and self-confidence, like in Boy Scouts, or the shared vision of our congregation, and developing acceptance and love, and promoting peace. Um, and the idea of one of the principles that I see listed in several ways in the Unitarian Universalist congregations is this idea of accepting and loving on others, uh, but then also the intentionality then of encouraging each other, of challenging each other to take the step, whatever that may be, to help our neighbors, to make a difference in this world, to see kindness um, and peace grow in our world, and then helping in terms of helping and encouraging people to make decisions. Um, Whether for me as a scoutmaster to encourage my kids to develop a menu for a camp out, um, and then helping and enabling them to fulfill that menu, and going on camping trips where I eat some pretty challenging food. Um, and then coming back and saying, okay, so what did we do well with that, and how can we do it better? And then providing again, repeating that process of saying, okay, make some more decisions, giving them increasing challenges, um, whether it be kids at home, um, be kids in my scout troop, other leaders in the congregation, um, or even encouraging those that come into our daily lives. I mean, we have opportunities each day, even with a pandemic. Um, I'm just amazed at the number of interactions that are possible with Zoom and telephone, and the different interaction, email, things that open up to us the opportunity to make a decision to make a difference, and to encourage others, and to empower those who have challenges. So that's one of the reasons why this quote means so much to me. Um, that there's an intentionality there, and as we grow in our ability as leaders to impact others, to empower others, that it makes our opportunity to make a difference in this world, and in so many different ways. Oh, for those of you on the phone who can't see all this PowerPoint, I'm so sorry, but the quote is, leaders become great not because of their power, but because of their ability to empower others. A quote from John Maxwell. Uh, One of the natural challenges of each day comes in the conflicts that we have. Conflict, of course, is a very natural part of our day, and so I love this Chinese kanji. For those of you on the telephone, I'm putting up a kanji that um, in Chinese means crisis or conflict. Got two parts to it, which is what makes it so meaningful to me. The first part speaks of danger, and the danger that it's there when we let conflict go unresolved. But also then the second part being the opportunity we have to grow as we resolve conflicts, and the resulting growth of relationships, of, uh, of group cohesiveness, uh, as groups grow uh, to reach their vision, and achieve their goals. So I wanted to stop there so that you didn't feel like you're drinking from a fire hose too much more, but also to give us an opportunity to spend some time reflecting together about it, because there's just so much when it comes to leadership, and so many different ways that we can certainly have a conversation about it. So Rose, I'll turn it back over to you.
Thank you, Kevin. That was really, really good and helpful. I too was very active in the Scouts, and when I was a senior in high school, I was the vice president of senior planning board, president of my senior troop, and I was leader of a troop of junior Girl Scouts. So quite involved. And back then it was before seatbelts, so I could put my whole troop of junior Girl Scouts in my Volkswagen van and drive them around. Could you talk a little bit about your Eagle Scouts, because they've actually grown up and become leaders
Rose,
of more
Rose,
Scouts?
it's,
Yes, Jay.
I'm so sorry. Could Kevin stop screen sharing for a moment so we can
Okay.
see the whole gallery here? Thank you.
Great suggestion. Okay, gallery. All right. Ah, I can see all these smiling faces. All right. Well, yeah, after 50 years, I not only have Eagle Scouts who've gone from our troop in Harlem onto significant roles in life, but I actually now have kids of those kids in my troop. So yeah, um, definitely been motivated by the growth that we see from low income kids, um, mostly non-white and mostly low income, um, and doing so over time. Uh, we've seen, back in the 80s, mothers would come in with their son, and it was always, we just want to have a positive male role model in their life. And um, today, it's what we hear is mothers coming in with their son and saying, "Please do something with this kid so that he can get off the internet." Um, and of course, we are just a male troop, but there's now troops that have girls in them as well. Some girl troops, and so the Boy Scouts provide an educational program that facilitates opportunities to grow, to be challenged, to give kids the opportunity to do exactly as I've laid out, to make decisions, and to follow through on those, to do so to the point where some actually reach that goal of Eagle Scout, which currently about 4 or 5% across the U.S. Complete that goal.
Excellent.
Some have gone on to. I have one. My first Eagle Scout um, got a scholarship with Westinghouse and went for 4 years to Northwestern. Um, you know, just the investment bankers, the police officers, a number of kids have gone into the military. It's just a real joy to think about some of the impact that not only we've been enjoyed as leaders, because my wife camps with us each month. So I say we, um, as well as the impact they've had on each other and the enduring relationships that they've had.
Thank you, Kevin. Let's get to some more questions. Go ahead, Jim Tarvin.
Yeah, just playing the devil's advocate a little bit, Kevin. Fidel Castro, Trump, Hitler, these are people who you cannot deny powerful leaders.
Mm-hmm.
And they don't seem to have any of the characteristics that you have mentioned.
Mm. Yeah, there's different ways to measure success. The person I would bring as along with that is we've had a national conference on leadership for several decades, and early on, a professor from Stanford by the name of Jim Collins, you might recognize the name or the book the bestseller called Good to Great, has on 3 different occasions been one of our speakers. And we challenged Professor Collins on his premises for Good to Great and said, will this really work in a not-for-profit organization where you don't have a paycheck to hold over people? And while he might not admit it, the 30-page monograph that he published a couple years later, I think really displays a radical shift in his thinking about what it means to be successful as a leader. Not being successful in terms of power and coercing people with a paycheck, or powers that some of the people you brought forward have had, but really leading people towards growth and change and making a difference through motivation and through self-development. Huge difference. So with power, you can manage people to do things, maybe even things they don't want to do. With really what I think in terms of leadership, I think of someone who's encouraging and empowering others. And of course, defining leadership is something we could spend hours on talking about, because that's also been one of the big discussions. I mean, it seems like every 10 or 15 years, the Harvard Review has a cover story of, our leaders made or born, and the whole definition of leadership and what it means to be successful. So I don't know if that's the same spin on the question that you had, or if you wanted to pursue that.
Thank you. Mike, did you have a question?
Well, I was just going to offer perhaps an answer to Jim's question, which is also, it seems to me that the 3 leaders that he mentioned also had populations who were oppressed, suffering in a terrible situation. The Cubans were very unhappy. The Germans were certainly unhappy. Trump found a population of Americans who were all unhappy. So it seemed to me that the power accrued to them out of the power of their followers.
Mm.
It's a good point.
And of course, whenever there's a void in leadership, and that opens the door for anything, right?
Patrick, go ahead.
Yeah, I think for Jim's question, the one thing, as Mike alluded to, is I would put these 3 individuals in the upper left-hand box, using the term great very loosely, but they all had a shared vision with their followers. Whether the vision was against their own self-interest or not is irrelevant to their style of leadership, which is to appeal to the beliefs of their followers and reinforce those beliefs as being the only valid beliefs that are acceptable.
Yeah. Could I just say that if you look at Christianity over the centuries, the power of the sword, torture, use of armies to maintain control and leadership is the story of much of the history of Western civilization. So I don't really see a huge difference between some of the techniques that the dictators used and some of the techniques that were used historically for literally centuries by Christians.
Mm. Well, and certainly, in spite of the purest notions in any organization, there's abuse, and certainly even with high regard that I have for a piece like the Bible's been used as um, a thumping rod, and been rationalized and used as justification as things are taken out of context and applied to life. So yeah, and power is definitely one of the what they say. Absolute power corrupts absolutely. It's a challenge.
Diane, go ahead.
Thank you, Kevin. That was very interesting, and I'm really glad that you used Jesus as an example of a great leader. And being a member of this congregation for many years, we've had opportunities to attend many leadership trainings.
Mm.
And it's a different slant as a Unitarian. The slant on leadership
Mhm.
is more using discernment circles based on what kind of like what Martin Luther King Jr. used
Okay.
and what John Lewis used during the Civil Rights Movement. And that's what I really like about our faith is that we try to learn from everybody.
Mm.
And when there's an issue on the table, and I know it makes some of us crazy because we're going through this right now in one of our leadership planning groups, but in the spirit of our trainings, that's sort of that you respect the interdependent web and you respect how we all need to work together.
Mm.
And we try to come to consensus when we can, but it's just a different view of leadership
Mhm.
that I really like. I really enjoyed the training that Reverend Chris introduced to all of us. So you're probably familiar with different styles of that. So I just wanted to interject that the idea of leadership from a Unitarian point of view is as inclusive as possible,
Mm.
and that everybody's viewpoint is important. You know, respect for all of us and all of our
Mm.
different opinions. So I just want to throw that out there.
Yeah, it sounds very much like the servant leadership that's a very popular
Yeah,
topic in religious circles. Yeah.
yeah.
Jay, did you want to say something, or are you telling me we're out of time?
Oh, not quite yet. I wanted to thank Kevin. I wondered if you could speak to the notion that for us to be good leaders, we also need to be good followers.
Hmm. Of course, you can't be a leader without followers.
But I'm not saying exactly that. It's a different question. Yeah.
No, I think it actually your question goes back to what Jim and Mike were speaking to. What's your motivation in leadership? As a scoutmaster, my motivation could be to have the most active troop and to produce the most Eagle Scouts in Manhattan. Which certainly there's a certain ego part to that satisfaction for me. But the reality is that the more I give my scouts the opportunity to lead, then the more I step back and follow that leadership, uh, the more they're able to grow and be transformed literally by those opportunities. And of course, there's also a sense in which, especially when it comes to being a leader of a group within a group, that you then become part of a leadership team. And so your ability to follow and to encourage each other as part of that leadership team, part of being an effective leader.
Excellent point. We are getting close to our time now. We're going to conclude the service, but remember, we will be there for fellowship hour, and you can continue talking on this topic. Kevin, that was really excellent. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
We have some closing music. Oh, we're going to turn off the recording now. And we have some closing music for St. Patrick's Day. I want to wish everyone a St. Patrick's Day, and let's enjoy this Irish song.